Welcome. Welcome to our webinar on how to use Poll Everywhere. We're going to get started now. I'm Wendy Tietz, and I'm joined by Jennifer Canis and Tracy Miller-Noble. And we are going to be talking about how to use Poll Everywhere. If you have questions in general about polling system options, we did do another webinar on polling system options. And you can find that recording at the URL on the screen, tiny.tc/AIA-polling video. Or you can go to our website, accountingisanalytics.com. And I'm going to now turn it over to Tracy, and she's going to talk about Poll Everywhere.
Thank you so much, Wendy. So the purpose of this webinar today is to explain step-by-step instructions on how to use Poll Everywhere in your online courses. So let's begin first by talking about the features of Poll Everywhere. So the great thing about Poll Everywhere is that there are several different question types, and we're only going to highlight a couple of those question types today. But there are so many different types of question types that you can use in your online courses. In addition, Poll Everywhere now has a competition feature similar to another polling system called Kahoot that allows for you to create competitions in your courses so that you can have your students compete against each other and see who wins the competition to create a lot of student engagement. There is also an asynchronous option that's available for Poll Everywhere, so you can set up a Poll Everywhere and then allow your students to answer it in their own time. It provides robust reporting that we're going to detail at the end of our webinar today on how many questions your student answered correctly and incorrectly. And the best news is that right now, all educators can get access to a free 90-day premium plan due to the COVID virus situation here. So that's a great thing for all of us to get that premium plan and be able to use Poll Everywhere in our courses. Now, as we mentioned, that one of the advantages of Poll Everywhere is that it does have that competition feature similar to what we see in Kahoot. Also allows you to collect grade information. You need the premium plan in order to access that, and that grade information will allow you to use some participation points if you want to. And one of the things I really like about it is how easily it integrates into PowerPoint. Now the disadvantages is that it is free for now. So after 90 days, if you wanted to continue to use it, you would need to purchase some type of a plan. The version that I used before COVID was the free plan, and if you use the free plan, you're limited to 40 participants, and you also don't have the grade information that you have with one of the paid plans. So right now, you're going to have access to all of those extra bells and whistles. Once the 90-day plan free period changes, then if you don't purchase a paid plan, you have some limitations. The other thing that's a limitation is that you can only have one poll open at a time. So if you're using a poll in this class, you can't also open up another poll in a separate class. So let's look at what Poll Everywhere looks like when we have created a poll. So we have this poll right here, which we've set up to identify which of the following assets cannot be depreciated. And this is set up, Wendy set this up so that you could answer the question using your phone or computer. So the student would go directly to the website pollev.com/Wendy Tietz. And let's see what that looks like. So if you want to join us, if you want to go to that website, pollev.com/Wendy Tietz, enter in your answer on which of the following assets cannot be depreciated. And then once we see some responses, we'll begin to see the poll activity show up in our web recording right now. So this would be the same experience that you would be able to use in your online courses. So you can see that we see lifetime feed of what the answers are using the Poll Everywhere experience. So great, excellent. I see that we've got a variety of different answers, and then as an instructor, you can talk about what those answers are. So now there is also an option for you to use a texting service in addition to the web address. So Wendy set up her poll with just the web address, but you can also activate the poll so that your students could use a text messaging service. The phone number that they would text to is listed there on the screen for your students. That 37607 would be the phone number that your students would text to. And then they would text your code, and my code is Tracy Nobles 585. So they would text that code in the text messaging system. And that would then activate the Poll Everywhere response for the students so that they could participate in the Poll Everywhere question and answer session by texting instead of going into the online webinar system. So that's a great way for us to understand exactly how Poll Everywhere looks. So now let's talk about how we actually get an account and what the steps are. So the first thing we're going to do to create an account is we're going to go to the Poll Everywhere website, which is polleverywhere.com. Right now on their main website, they are offering that complimentary 90-day premium plan. So you'll click the sign up for free button there. After you click the sign up for free button, you're going to need to create or enter in some additional information. So we'll see that additional information on this next screen. I also like that on the next screen, it tells you what you're getting for that premium trial version. So notice 700 participation size, you get the grading feature, and you also get the enhanced reporting feature. So really nice 90-day trial. So you'll click that Start Trial button, and then there's where you enter in all of your information. And then once you get that information entered in, then your account is going to be created. So once you have your account created, the next thing we need to understand is we need to understand the different types of questions. We're going to talk about 4 different types of questions in our webinar today, the 4 that I use most commonly. But you'll notice that there on the screen here, there's a variety of different types of questions. So I like to use the multiple choice, the word cloud, and the open-ended response system, and also the competition area. But you can see there's so many different options for us. So let's take a look at what the different 4 question types look like. So the first one is multiple choice. We saw that when we did our depreciation question. So you can see this provides us with information about a multiple choice type question. Another one of my favorite types of polls is to do the word cloud. I like the word cloud because it allows students to enter in a variety of different answers, and the most common answer gets the biggest, or it's the largest of those answers. So it's a really nice option to do when you want students to enter in a lot of different types of answers. And then the next type of question that we have is called an open-ended question. This is similar to a word cloud, except it produces a different result. So in an open-ended question, you see a list of all the students' answers, and it scrolls through those students' answers. So instead of creating a word cloud, it simply lists out the different answers that your students provide you with. And then lastly, the last type of question type we have is the competition question type, and we're going to look at that in just a moment after we go through how to create a question. So we'll look at the competition in just a minute. So now let's go and learn how to create your first poll. So you've got your account set up, and so what you're going to do is you're going to log in on the Poll Everywhere website. After you log in, you come into the main screen where you create your first poll at. And on the left-hand side, you'll click Create. By the way, we're going to create your first poll in the Poll Everywhere online web system. But we are also going to show you how to create the poll in PowerPoint too. So you have two ways to create a poll. You can create it on the website, like we're going to show you here, and then you can create it in PowerPoint or Google Slides, and we're going to show you how to do it in PowerPoint in just a minute. So again, we're on the website. We're going to click Create on the left-hand side of the screen, and then it's going to bring up an option for us to decide what type of question do we want to create. So we're going to create a multiple choice question here. So I selected multiple choice for question type. Then the next thing you'll do is you'll see on the next slide, you're going to insert your question prompt. Then you will insert the different answer options, and don't forget to select the correct answer. So making sure that you identify land as being the correct answer. You can choose to have more than one correct answer, so it's nice that it does give you the ability to do that. After you have added the answer options in and your poll is ready to go, you'll simply hit select Create. So now we've created our poll. It's as simple as that. So now we've created our poll. So after we do that, how do we deploy a poll? So from the website, it's very easy to deploy a poll. From that main page that we were on where we created the poll, you're going to select the poll option at the top of the screen. This will list all of the different questions that you have created. And you can sort them in a variety of different ways and categorize them. So there's that question that I created. Which of the following assets cannot be depreciated? To simply deploy the poll, you're simply going to just click on the question that you want to deploy. When you do that, a screen will be opened up that allows you to click on the button that says Activate. And that's all that's required in order to activate the poll system. Now, you'll notice that there are a couple of different options in that area. So one of the features of Poll Everywhere is that you can decide whether you want to show your responses right away or whether you want to hide students' responses. And so you can toggle that Show Response button on and off to either show students the answers right away or to show them in delayed time. You can also, after you have a period of time go by, you can also select Show Correct. That will identify to the student what the correct question is. You can also lock the poll. Locking the poll question would signify that no one else can answer the question. You can clear your responses. I use this a lot, especially if students don't get, the majority of them don't get the correct answer the first time around. I'll say, well, that's not the correct answer, so let's try it again. Work with your neighbor and resubmit your answer. And then also you have the option to utilize the full screen option instead of just showing it in the web browser area. So a robust series of options for you to deploy the poll. Now we also have some additional settings available in the Poll Everywhere website. The first one is configuring how people can respond. And this is the difference between the poll that Wendy set up and the poll that I set up. So Wendy only wanted her students to participate via the website, and I want my students to participate via the website and text messaging. So you can decide how do you want your students to respond by clicking either or both of those options. Now, the next thing you can do is you can also restrict the audience participation. So you can identify if you want everyone to participate, which is what I always do, so I don't have to register participants. And you can also, more importantly, you can either have students' names be shown or it can be completely anonymous. And so I like to do both of these. If I'm grading participation, or if I have a situation where I'm not concerned about students' names being shown, then I'll just let their screen names be shown. Or you can have it completely anonymous where they're assigned an anonymous name and you don't have any idea who is answering in which way. Now, we also have some configurations that we can do for response settings. So in response settings, you can say how many times does each person have the ability to respond. You can allow them to respond as many times as they like. You can change the answer, allowing them to either lock in their answer or change the answer. And you could customize a reply message. I don't bother doing that though. So those are the configurations that are available for these other settings in the Poll Everywhere website. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the things I love about Poll Everywhere is how easy it is to utilize Poll Everywhere directly from the PowerPoint software. In order to create Poll Everywhere questions in PowerPoint, the first thing you have to do is you have to download the app on your computer that you're going to use PowerPoint. So from that main screen, after you've logged into the website, on the poll screen, you're going to see on the left-hand corner, you're going to click on PowerPoint. That will download a application that will be integrated into your PowerPoint software. So on the next slide, you're going to see that you're going to click the download button. You will download the software onto your computer. You'll install the software, and then you'll be ready to start PowerPoint. Now, I do have to point out that you do have to do this on every computer that you're using. So I had to install this when I was using it on my desktop computer, and if I'm going to work on my laptop computer, it also has to be installed on that. So you have to have it in, when you create the questions, you have to have it on the computer that you're going to be using. So now, once we have downloaded the application and we've gotten it installed, we're ready to start PowerPoint. And so this is how we will go about creating a question in PowerPoint. So once you've done that, when you open up PowerPoint, you're now going to see a new tab on the PowerPoint toolbar. And that tab is going to be the Poll Everywhere tab. So you'll click on the Poll Everywhere tab. And then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to click on New Activity. Poll Everywhere calls a poll an activity. And so when you click that New button and select Activity, it's going to allow you to decide what type of poll question do you want to deploy. And you'll see this is so similar to the screen that we saw earlier where I have the different options that I want to create. And so I selected multiple choice. I added in my title and my answer options. I selected the correct answer. And then the next thing I did was I simply selected Insert. And after I selected Insert, then Poll Everywhere created this slide in my PowerPoint presentation that I have already built. And so now I am ready to go ahead and deploy the poll from PowerPoint. So in order to deploy the poll from PowerPoint, all you have to do is show the PowerPoint slide. just like you would normally do when you're going to do a presentation. So when you do a presentation, you simply go to slideshow, and you can either start from the beginning or you can start from a specific slide. And when you do that, then you will be able to deploy the poll from the PowerPoint area, so from the beginning. Now, I do want to show you that there are some additional features on that area. So the first feature is sync. The sync feature allows you to sync up with the website. So if you wanted to, if you had if you were using the website and you wanted to sync it into PowerPoint, that will allow you to do that. You will then have the clear response button. That's the one I use a lot. The clear response button is the button that allows you to clear your responses after you've deployed the poll. And the other button that I want to point out to you is I also want to point out the convert button. So the convert button is actually really cool. If you have questions already built in PowerPoint, because maybe you used a different system like an iClicker system, if your questions happen to be created correctly, like you use the title block and then the text block to create the questions, you can create the question and then select the slide and click convert, and it will actually convert it into a poll everywhere question. So that is a really, really nice feature when it comes down to deploying from poll everywhere. So now let's talk a little bit about competitions. I mentioned to you in the beginning of our presentation that Poll Everywhere, like Kahoot, has the ability for you to do competitions with your students. And this is so fun because it's a game that can be played live where your students are competing against each other. So your student performance can, of course, be tracked. The students can be placed into groups. Again, we can use that feature where we randomly assign names, or we can use real names. And the fun part about competitions is that accuracy and speed counts. So the quicker the student answers their question and the correct answer, the more points they're going to be allotted. So the limitation from this is that you need to type new questions into a competition. So if you had other questions already created, you can't copy those questions into the competition. So you have to start those competitions up essentially from scratch. So now on the next slide, you're going to see what it looks like.
Tracy,
Yeah.
I'd like to break in here
Yeah.
and talk a little bit more about competitions, because I've used them quite a bit. So the competitions, another thing to understand about competitions is they are limited to multiple choice questions. You cannot use a different type of question. So when you talk about needing to type new questions in a competition, you could copy another competition and start with that, but there's no way to get any other questions into that. So that to me is a fairly big limitation. The other thing to understand about competitions is they can only be played from the Poll Everywhere website. They cannot be played from within PowerPoint. So it's just a little bit different. I think it has a lot more resources needed, and that's why you have to switch to using the website. And Tracy, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about the next couple slides. This one is what the competition looks like. You have the option of letting your students use their real names. I think that's a bad idea for privacy. So you can have Poll Everywhere generate fictitious names for your students, and you will be able to tell from the report who that is. So you will know, but the student's privacy is preserved. Another thing here is you can run Poll Everywhere asynchronously. So this is where maybe you want to run a poll after class. Maybe the last couple days before an exam, you want to do, you want to issue some review questions. So you can set up the activity, and then you share your Poll Everywhere URL. So where you logged in to do the question earlier, the pollev.com/wteats, that would be what you would share. You cannot do competitions asynchronously, so that's something to keep aware. So you can just do polls, like 1 or 2 or 3 or more questions, but they aren't competitions. The other big limitation I find with Poll Everywhere is that you can only have one activity running at a time. So let's say you use it in class, okay, and then after class you say, I'm going to put out these review questions for students to try anytime over the next couple days, but if you're going to have class in the meantime, you have to end that. So there can only be one thing ever running at a time, and sometimes that's not a problem, other times it is, so it's good to be aware of that. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about here about Poll Everywhere are the reports. You have lots of reports available in Poll Everywhere. They can be by student, by poll, by activity. So poll and activity means like the whole collection of questions or just one question at a time. And I think one of the key strengths of Poll Everywhere is its reporting. And so this is a poll I gave in my class. This is one of the reports. This is a report where it lists students by last name. They're blurred out there. And then it tells me their rank in terms of answering the questions. And this happened to be, it wasn't a competition, it was just polling during class. And it tells me the grade that they earned, you know, the percentage of questions they got right, and participation was, did they answer all the questions? So the second person there got 2 questions right out of 3, but answered all 3. So depending on how you want to grade, you have all that information available to you. There's lots of different reports. This one is a report of the different questions I asked. So one question I asked was, where will a liability appear? And it shows me of my students, how many people selected which answer, and the average engagement, meaning how many people answered the question. So that's one of the powers of Poll Everywhere, is the reporting. Also, I wanted to say on the competition, you can also group your students by teams. And when you're going to do that, the very first question is how you're going to separate them into teams. So you might, a real standard one would be, what color are your eyes, right? So they pick off a multiple choice chart. And then depending on what eye color they pick, that's the team they're on. So your very first question in a competition can separate your students into teams. And then for the rest of the competition, they're on teams. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so now.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for adding those additional features. You know, as I said, I've never had the premium account, so I've never had the reporting feature, but it will be so nice to have the 90-day upgrade to be able to get some of those additional great, robust reporting areas that they have. Yes,
yes. So we've kind of come to the end of what we're talking about in terms of Poll Everywhere specifically. Tracy, do you want to talk about our resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar on how to poll everywhere. We're going to have some time to answer some questions, and I do see that we already have a couple in the question and answer area. But we have a series of webinars coming up over the next 2 weeks, so please follow our blog to get announcements about our future webinars dealing with online learning, and as things settle down in our transition, additional accounting analytics cases and projects that we'll be developing for you and your students. So on the next slide, you're going to see the upcoming online teaching webinars that we have. We've got how-to sessions. We were doing one on PowerPoint recording using Collaborate Ultra, using a Microsoft Surface to write on your screen, or maybe you're thinking about getting a Microsoft Surface computer, how to use Zoom for office hours or class, and also using Kahoot in your online courses. You can sign up for those webinars on our website, accountingisanalytics.com. Also, if you can't make it, you can find our recordings on our webinar. On our website. So just remember, online teaching is like serving a gourmet meal, but remote teaching is serving a peanut butter sandwich. So which would you prefer to serve? A gourmet meal with Poll Everywhere and a lot of student interaction, or something where you just put some boring lecture videos out there and you don't have great interaction with your students? So many great options with Poll Everywhere to create interaction with your students while you're doing your online courses. So Wendy, do we have any questions?
Yes,
No,
Jennifer.
Yeah.
Jennifer's gonna ask. Jennifer has questions queued up.
Yes,
Excellent,
I did.
great.
So the first question is, someone tried to download the Excel option, but cannot see the Poll Everywhere app in the Excel ribbon. So they're asking for suggestions there to troubleshoot that.
I am not familiar with an Excel option. I am only familiar with the PowerPoint and Google Slides option. Wendy, are you familiar?
No, it can be used in Keynote, PowerPoint, and Google, whatever Google's product is. If you are talking about PowerPoint and not seeing it show up, you can Google it. Basically, put Poll Everywhere, don't see the in the ribbon, and it should come up with instructions. And then Poll Everywhere is excellent about getting back to you with help requests. So do pursue that, but I would first Google it, because Poll Everywhere has lots of different blog postings.
Great. So we have another question. Shelley's asking how students get to the poll when they're watching the PowerPoint, and can there be more than one question at a time in a poll?
Okay, great. So that's a great question. So students, when they're watching the PowerPoint, you will deploy the screen like we saw in the beginning, the one that said which of these assets cannot be depreciated. And on that screen, you will have the way students answer the poll. It will either be by answering it through a web address, the poll.ev/ and then your name, or by answering it via text message with a phone number and a code that they type in. So that's how students answer the poll question when they're watching the PowerPoint. Now go ahead, Wendy.
I was going to talk about the asynchronous option.
Yeah, great. So, yes, please do.
I think, so as Tracy described, during live class, they go to that URL just like we did some time ago to answer the question, and that's great. Now, if you're talking, so like me, if you're like me, where you show the recording then later and you still want the students to answer those questions, then you set up an asynchronous session, and a poll consists of multiple questions. Poll Everywhere's terminology for a question is an activity. So you can have a poll set up with all the questions from your recording, and students can answer it asynchronously as long as they're done before you need to do another poll in Poll Everywhere.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly what I do, Wendy. Like when I'm doing it, like I'll set up a poll that covers chapter 4, and then I'll put a bunch of questions, which remember they call activities, in that poll. And then you can go through those live or asynchronously like you do, Wendy.
Fantastic. There's some other questions here. Shelley also asked what you use for live teaching, live online teaching. So do you want to talk about if you have preferences for certain types of questions or certain ways you use Poll Everywhere in live versus asynchronous?
Yeah,
live online, I guess.
So I use GoToMeeting to do my live teaching. as my software that deploys the PowerPoint and my screen recording system. And then I really like the multiple choice questions, and I also like the word cloud and the open response questions. Those are the three that I use most exclusively.
I myself use Collaborate Ultra or Zoom as my recording device, and I use a variety of question types. Some of the question types are not compatible with texting, so that's why when you saw mine, it was only the web. And I also feel their students are watching the lecture after class, they're probably on a computer anyway. So I use a wide variety of question types every day.
Okay, we have another great question asking if we can download our presentation and use Poll Everywhere using Teams. Microsoft Teams?
Yes, we use Teams. We're currently, I've used it one semester with students off and on. Because of the size of my classes, it becomes a little more challenging. So Microsoft, up until a couple weeks ago, if you had more than 250 students in it, you would have to do what's known as a Microsoft live event. And once you're in a live event, there is a lag time of anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, which doesn't lend itself to polling. So that's a whole nother issue. But Microsoft just upped the meetings to 350. So if you have less than that for students, you're in good shape. So you could absolutely do this with Teams. That's for sure. Now, keep in mind, if your students have Office 365 licenses, another option for you just to keep in the back of your head is Microsoft Forms, which is an add-on within PowerPoint. It's actually within Teams, and you can actually build forms. Form is a question. You can build questions right into your PowerPoint. That's beyond the scope of what we're doing, but that's just a heads up if you're using Teams.
Okay, and we have another question that asks if we can present individual polls for separate class sections when using asynchronous polls, or can you only present one poll at a time for all sections?
Wendy?
If you're doing it synchronously, if you're presenting, well, the answer is you can only do one, right? You can only do one thing at a time. So your account can only have one activity open at a time, period. So you could do different things in every class, but not at the same time. You're not going to be able to use that asynchronous option. So you could certainly do different polls from section to section to section as long as you're doing it live. But once you get into asynchronous, you have to cut it off before the next class starts.
Yeah, I just choose not. That's the reason actually why I choose not to use the asynchronous option, is because I like to be able to not worry about if I have a poll going, you know, if I have an asynchronous thing going and I want to use it. So I do my polling live when I do my traditional classes and now my online courses, and then I shut the poll down so that I don't have to worry about whether I can use it again or not.
I actually use a combination of polling systems to get around that. So I might use Poll Everywhere live, but then I'll go to a different polling system asynchronously. So you just kind of have to be creative and think about what's important to you.
Great. I think that about covers all the questions. There are some questions early on, but I think you talked about and addressed those questions as the presentation continued.
Yeah, I do want to point out, Jennifer, I do see a question on here, and I just want to make sure that it's really explicit about that. And the question I see is, do students have to register for an account in order to use this? And they absolutely do not. So unlike some of the other polling systems that you may have used, students do not have to have an account to participate in Poll Everywhere. The only thing they need is simply some type of device, whether that be a computer, a phone, a tablet, some way of answering the question, and they simply have to be able to either text an answer or to be able to go to the internet and get to the web address that you provided them with. So students do not have to register for an account in order to use it.
Right, and I want to follow up with that with one more fine point. If you're using reporting, you have to be able to know who's using that, right? And I've done it both ways. One way you can do is you can have it so you tell the students if you don't want them, because they're going to have to sign in, they're going to have to tell you who it is if you're using it for grading. So in that case, you're going to have them sign up. They don't have to have an account, but you send them out an invitation. And so they sign in one time from their device with their school email address or however you're identifying them. And then they have to use that. And you can lock the polls down so that only students using their official school address can get into it. Because if you are relying on the reports for grades, you do need to have the students consistently be who they are in the polling. Okay. So is that it, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think that's
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming today, and just reminding you, we have several more webinars over the next couple days, next week or two, and good luck with everything you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks so much, guys.
Yep, thank you. Bye.